Hello, and welcome to the Diary of an Age Grouper podcast. My name is Jamie Edwards, and I'm a full-time professional endurance coach, age group triathlete, and triathlon fan. The Diary of an Age Grouper podcast is all about content relevant to age groupers. We'll talk to athletes, coaches, and experts who walk the walk. On this episode of the Diary of an Age Grouper podcast, we speak to Roland Crantock. Roland is new to triathlon and completed his first 70.3 in March 2022. Since then, he has dropped his 70.3 finish time from 4 hours and 25 minutes down to sub 3 hours and 50 minutes. Recently, he was the fastest age grouper at Melbourne 70.3. We talk about life outside of triathlon, what a typical race build looks like, managing shift work, his race at Melbourne, and the importance of disco muscles. I think we would all like Roland's rate of improvement, and we look forward to seeing what he does next. For now, enjoy the journey so far. This is the Diary of an Age Grouper. Roland, thanks for joining us. How are you today?
Doing very well, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me on.
No worries at all. So obviously you have just raced Melbourne 70.3 and you were the first age grouper across the line, or the fastest age grouper on the day. So we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit about life outside of triathlon?
Yeah, so I guess I work in healthcare at the moment. So I just finished uni in my first year as a doctor. So that's probably the main thing that's taking up time outside of triathlon. And so I try to keep a good bit of a mix between the triathlon and work. So that's probably the main thing. And then apart from that, I just like to spend time with the family and the dog at home, just relaxing, kicking the feet up.
Yeah, nice. So where is home for you?
I'm out in the southeast of Melbourne, so I'm out in Berwick, which is turning into a bit of a hub now. It's like getting super developed, but it used to be really good for riding, but now it's like getting a bit busy with cars and stuff like that. So it's getting a little bit sketchy out there on the roads, but still managed. Yeah, but I've lived out here in Melbourne my whole life, so yeah, grew up in the area.
Yep, and how long have you been in the sport?
Uh, I would say in triathlon, probably about a year and a half. Now I think I started the first race I did was Melbourne 70.3 when it was in March in 2021, I think it was. So it was the first triathlon I'd pretty much ever done. And then from there, I just got addicted to it. And so for the last year and a half, just getting more and more, I guess, infatuated with the sport as we all do. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's a fairly short history. So this part's not going to take us long. So um, yeah, so obviously a year and a half, pretty steep trajectory, I'd say. But while we're on the subject, can you tell us how the first race went in 2021?
Oh,
Just as
I
a
had
quick
no,
overview and your finish
yeah,
time and
yeah.
that kind of thing, just for context.
Yeah. So I think I'd have to look back at the actual results. I think my time was 4:25 or something like that. But that was on a road bike as well, so a bit of a different situation. But I had no clue what I was doing really. Like I think training for it, I was just like predominantly doing some intermittent riding, no structure to it. And then about 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, I decided I should probably start running off the bike. And then for swimming, I did like maybe 4 or 5 2K swims in the pool just to make sure I could actually survive the swim. So yeah, and then on the race, I just had no race plan. Just thought go like hell for leather in the swim, try and stick up. And then on the bike, I think had no clue what I was doing. Didn't even know my power numbers. Was just like yeah, going way too hard. I bonked with 20 k's to go, and then the run was just horrendous. I cramped up so much, and yeah, it was pretty horrible experience in comparison to what the past few races have been like.
Yeah, and so what was your background in sport, if any, prior to deciding to enter Melbourne 70.3 in 2021? And
Yeah,
what was that catalyst for deciding you wanted to give middle distance triathlon a go?
yeah. I like growing up through school, we always had to do school sport. And so I was always pretty keen into like running. Not that I'm like a particularly good runner, but I was always into it, like just doing sort of longer runs around. And then I got really into rowing whilst I was in like high school. And so I did that for a few years up until year 12, and then stopped that as I got into university just because the time commitment was proving too much of a bit of a difficult thing. And then from rowing, I remember one of the coaches one time had said, "Oh, cycling's actually really good cross training." And so in about year 10 or 11, I picked up cycling and then fell more in love with cycling than I sort of had with rowing. And so I had already had that running and cycling background. And then throughout school, I'd always had swimming lessons and everything like that. So sort of done all three of them, you know, outside of each other. And then I think like it got to COVID and I sort of, I don't know, got a bit bored with what I was doing. I was just sort of doing uni and some intermittent riding. I thought, oh, would be good to just get out there and have a crack at something. And then I don't know why I chose to do an iron half Ironman. Thought it sounded cool, so thought I'd give it a crack. And then yeah, there you go.
Yes, mate. And that was literally your first triathlon?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I didn't even do the Weet-Bix kids triathlons growing up. Wish I had, but no, that was the first one.
Yeah, okay. And how you were rowing for 2 to 3 years. So what sort of level, like what was the training commitment there and what distances were you racing at?
For rowing, was it? Sorry.
Yeah, for your rowing, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Throughout school, you just do. I think from year 10, you pick it up, and so for about 3 years of rowing, and then um, I mean, it's just schoolboy rowing, so you're doing like 2 to 3 sessions a week in the boat, and they get you to do some cross training on the running and the bike as well. But yeah, I never like got to an elite level outside of rowing. I think I went to the Vic, like the national championships a few like 2 years and won some of the races there. But no, nothing super special.
Interesting. And did you do any testing through that time through the later years of school? And was there any other indication that you might be quite good at endurance sport, or is it just something you enjoyed doing and naturally gravitated towards and just evolved from there?
Uh, I'm just trying to think back to like any specific endurance ones. Always on the rowing, like we had to do the 2K tests, and you know, I just always had a bit of a, I don't know, like a sadistic pleasure, like going hard, on the 2K ergo and just really, rooting yourself and turning yourself inside out. But no, I don't think like otherwise all the other cycling and running, I'd always just sort of done it for more pleasure, I guess, than actual formal training. Yeah.
So you're just generally a bit of a weirdo.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all are in triathlon. You've got to enjoy some level of hurting yourself. Um, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe something happened to me when I was a kid, got dropped or something, and then just like, oh, I had to do too much exercise.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So just take us through the progression from that first 70.3 and 425. So by your own admission, like not your best day out, you did some intermittent training for it. But I think in the grand scheme of triathlon and 70.3 finish times, 425 is not terrible. It's a pretty solid, first race, especially with limited training. So just walk us through. I'm assuming you've done Melbourne each year thereafter, being a local boy. So just sort of talk us through the progressions from that first one in 2021 right through to 2023, the race that happened a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I actually missed Melbourne last year, because I was training for Bustleton, the Ironman. So, but I'll get into that maybe. But I think after doing Melbourne the first year in 2021, I just remember seeing all these other guys flying past me on the run and thought they looked so schmick, and like very, very dialed in. And I thought, wow, like it'd be fantastic to feel like that on the run. Um, and I saw one of my mates who I knew from rowing, running past, and he was training with the Trivelo group, and I saw him run past, looking very strong, and so I thought, it would probably pay dividends to get some actual formal coaching, and an insight into the sport. So after doing that the first year, I reached out to Jared and the Trivelo team, and got some formal coaching from them, which is just like been invaluable, really. it just like knowing now what I know about training, I can't believe that I even decided to go out and have a crack at the half Ironman. So yeah, that really made a huge difference to what I was doing. And so I started doing some formalized sessions, actually like doing runs off the bike regularly and some structured training, looking at, you know, targeted power numbers and run paces and swim splits that started slow and then just gradually built up and then created a pretty good foundation to work from. Um, and so from that, I think the post endorphin rush after just finishing the half at Melbourne, it, I decided that I'd like to have a crack at doing the full Ironman. Um, and so yeah, with the formal training and that I worked up to do the Ironman at Busselton, which was a huge experience, and definitely something that I mean I'd want to do again. But it's definitely a, a huge step up from the half Ironman, that's for sure. So I did that last year at the end of 2022, and then have just sort of been progressing forward ever since then. After doing the full Ironman, I thought maybe time to step back down to the 70.3s, and so this year I've targeted sort of those. So this year I did Geelong, Sunny Coast, and Melbourne finally just 2 weeks ago. Yeah, and so it's been a good sort of comparison between life before structured training and life after, and then actually having targeted goals to train towards.
Yeah, sweet. So how did that Ironman in Busselton go? So that was a full, just over 12 months, 13 months after
Yeah,
your, oh no, it wouldn't have been, it would have been longer than that because Melbourne 70.3 in 2021 was in March, you said, is that right? So it would have been
yeah.
sort of, more like a year and a half worth of structured formal training with
It
a coach guiding you and went over to Busselton. So how did that first Ironman go?
it was definitely experience. I'll have to check the date because I think it was actually in the same year. I might be getting my dates confused. It was March 2022. So it's actually last year. I did my first one.
Ah, okay.
Um,
Yep. Gotcha.
yeah,
Yep.
apologies for
So
that.
same year. Yeah. Gotcha. Yep. No
Same
worries.
year. Yeah, and as I said, you know how you're always in the middle of the race, you think, oh, I'm never going to do one of these things ever again,
I've had
and
that
you just
thought from time to time. Yes.
and you're just hurting. You're in the trenches, and then you just finish, and then about 2 minutes after you finish, you get this massive rush, of endorphins. You're just like, wow, I can't wait to do that again. And I remember thinking, because this was my last year of uni, I'm never going to have this much time to train again, probably. Now's the best time to try and train for a full Ironman. So yeah, I reached out for some formal coaching and set that goal to do the full Ironman, but maybe without, I mean, it was an ambitious goal. I think I had about maybe, 6 months of training formally for it. Um, as I said, and I remember at the time, Jared was reluctant to take me on, I think, because he said it was a very ambitious goal to try and fit that much training in such a short amount of time. Um, so looking back at it now, yeah, I probably have to agree with him. I think maybe I was a little bit underdone. I could have benefited from a longer duration of training because you ended up doing, I think, some of the weeks I was doing 17 or 18 hours, I think, of training, which for me at the time was quite a lot. And yeah, working up to that, it not I still loved the training and I really loved what I was doing, but in comparison to training for 70.3s, I found the training to be quite exhausting. And it's a long time to be sitting out on the bike on a Saturday for 6 to 8 hours, by yourself, and then coming home and doing a run, then you're just sort of wrecked for the rest of the afternoon. So, yeah, the actual race experience, again, because of my first go, I think I was happy with how it went. Um, uh, a lot to learn, like a lot to, I learned a lot, sorry, from it. Really suffered on the run at the end. I couldn't had a bad day of nutrition and some GI upset issues towards the end of the run, which meant I couldn't really get any nutrition on, and then was just sort of hanging on for the last 20 Ks and couldn't eat anything. So that really hurt. But looking back at it now, I think that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And so now, whenever I rock up to try and do the 70.3, I think, well, I mean, you've already done a full Ironman. You can go so much harder now on the half Ironman. So I think that was an invaluable experience just to appreciate that. But I think maybe it was a little bit naive and trying to do it with such little training at the time for the standard that I sort of wanted to reach and with my performance.
Yeah, well, speaking of the standard you want to reach, what are your goals and aspirations in the sport now? Is it about getting faster? Is it about winning age group category or winning overall, or do you have aspirations to maybe race in the pro field? Like where are you at in terms of your goals and aspirations now?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I just want to always try and push my own limits. I mean, it's just trying to find, I guess, the how far I can push myself both mentally and physically is my number one goal. Um, I think if you get too wrapped up maybe in your performance, it can take a bit of the love away from the sport. Um, which that's why I think we all do it because we love the training, we love pushing ourselves, and it's really satisfying when you see a lot of hard work come to fruition on race day. So I think that's the number one thing that I want to keep on doing. Um, as for like continuing on with age group first professional aspirations in the sport, I mean, I would love to be a professional one day. I think maybe another year or two of continued training might be the best thing for me. I'd like to maybe continue to show that I can still perform at like a higher level, or maybe prove that before I maybe rush into stepping up. But I'm not too certain, to be honest. But I've signed up to do the age group world champs over at New Zealand next year. So I will probably be targeting that for next season. So we'll see how that goes. But I think that'll be the plan for now, and then just throughout the year continue to just try and uh, progress my own standards and try and push myself and lift the bar a little bit in my own performance. Yeah,
Yeah, cool. So maybe 2025, that could be where once you get through Taupo in 2024, you potentially reassess after that, see how you go, and potentially step up into the professional ranks if you feel like you've sort of proven to yourself that that could be feasible, and looking across to some of the performances in the pro ranks. So that'll be an
yeah,
interesting journey, and even at that point, it's you've still only been in the sport probably less than 3 years, so still quite an impressive and steep trajectory. So
yeah. No, well, thank you. Thanks for those kind words, Jamie. But yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable plan. I'm just trying not to make the same mistake as I did maybe for the Iron Man and rushing to things, but we'll see. It's always a good thing as well, maybe to I don't know. Having said that, being in a pro field where you're maybe towards the back of a pack can push you and really motivate you to go harder. But I guess it can also work in the same way where if you're struggling to hang on, sometimes maybe it can be a little bit demoralizing. So I'm not sure how I'd react in that situation, but I think I'm fairly intrinsically motivated so that it wouldn't bother me too much. But yeah, just something to think about, I think, before jumping into it.
yeah, it's probably getting that mix right of what are your motivations, and then if your underlying goal is to push your own personal limits, is racing in the age group field and doing it the way you've done it so far going to yield the biggest improvements in performance, or is it stepping up into the pro ranks and potentially sort of being back of the pack and aspiring to be better or pushing to be better? Is that gonna be the environment where you're gonna thrive? And I guess time will tell on that one.
Yeah, yeah. And having said that, though, I mean, I'm still fairly, I think, naive when it comes to the divisions between being a professional and, you know, amateur sort of athlete. So maybe I don't understand like the actual logistics behind it enough to make a formal decision. So I probably need to go and educate myself a little bit better about how that all works as well before I jump into it. But yeah,
Yeah, definitely. There's a bit more to it than just comparing your times and go, oh, I could match up here. Because obviously the pro race is you're racing and it's a racing dynamic. Whereas, in theory, as age groupers, we're time trialing and seeing who ends up with the fastest time, which we might get into some racing dynamics and how you approach race day when we start talking about Melbourne. But before we get into that, you mentioned earlier you have studied and you are now a medical doctor. So can you just tell us a little bit about work, your work hours? Are you doing shift work, and how you sort of manage that with your training?
Yeah, happy to go into it. It's a bit tricky with training, um, especially because as a junior doctor, you swap rotations quite regularly. Every 10 weeks or so, you'll be put onto a different unit. So that really does sort of make finding regular hours tricky, especially if you're doing emergency work as well, which I've done predominantly throughout this year. I think I've had 3 rotations out of the 5 have been in the ED, which means that like you may one day you might be working from 7:30 till 5:30, and then the next day you might be working from 2 till midnight, and then you might have a day off, and then you might be doing a run of 2 or 3 night shifts in a row from say 11 p.m. to 8 o'clock in the morning, which definitely makes it tricky to sort of one regulate your sleeping and your rest as well as the training and fitting it in. So it has been tricky. I think the most important thing or the most helpful thing that I've had is, as I said, having that structured sort of training and like a training plan from a professional and someone who knows what they're doing. So I think having a coach is the most helpful thing, to sort of, I guess, either plan your life around the training or sort of mold the training to your work life. And so it was quite easy to sort of like, if you needed to, you could swap, your long ride and your long run day to midweek, or split them up if you needed to, if that's just what was available. Um, and so for work, it's just, as I said, I really do love the training. And so every time I'm at work, it's just, I cannot wait to, for it to get to like the end of the day so that I can go and jump in the pool or get home and go for a ride. Because it's just I'm just so motivated to go and get training. I don't know why, but I just really do love it. Um, I also found that it was like, because we're at different sites. I'm at Monash Health at the moment, which is in the southeast of Melbourne, and they've got I think 5 or so different hospital sites. And so sometimes what I started to do was I started riding my bike to work as well, just as a bit of additional training. Um, Throughout the year, which just easy riding was good to just increase the volume and then save me just sitting in the car for 45 minutes just to spin the legs for 45 minutes. Definitely, I think helped a lot. So that was a good trick I think I sort of found throughout the year to maximize my time. Yeah, but it's definitely been a bit of a novel thing to get used to working full time as well, and not just being able to leave at 11 or 12 o'clock as you might have done when you're a medical student. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm assuming that you just put notes in your training program so your coach can sort of just build around what shifts you've got going on. And as you said before, typically a typical age grouper with your 9 till 5 might do their longer sessions on the weekend, but for you, your weekend, so to speak, could be midweek some weeks, or you know an odd day off midweek and then one day on the weekend. So I'm assuming you just sort of put your shifts when you know them in advance and just building around that.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. And I think just having flexibility in your training as well, um, is probably the main thing. Not being so rigid that like if you need to change a shift, or if you need to change if there's something important that's popped up in your work or in your personal life, that sometimes you got to have to work around that. So yeah.
Yeah, so having that structure and guidance and progressive nature of training, but at the same time being, fluid and flexible with that within reason.
Mm, mm, exactly.
All right, so now let's start to talk about Melbourne this year. So a little bit of context again. So first race in March 2022, we went 4:25. This race in November 2023 went 3:39 with a little asterisk on it because the swim was shortened. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
supposed to be about a kilometre swim. So say if we had 10 or 11 minutes, 11 minutes makes it easy. So that makes it a 3:50 finish time for the easy math. So again, quite a steep trajectory. You mentioned you went and did Bustleton in December of 2022. And then so far in 2023, you did Geelong 70.3, Sunshine Coast 70.3, and then Melbourne. just tell us quickly how Geelong and Sunshine Coast went, even just the finish times,
Yeah,
so we can
sure.
sort of track that progression, and then we'll get into training and the race at Melbourne.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Last year as well, I did Western Sydney in between Melbourne and the Ironman over at Busselton, and I think I did a 4:10 or 4:15, somewhere around that range. So
Yep.
probably about a 10-minute improvement,
Yep.
just in like 3 or 4 months of training and structured training. And then moving on from there, at Busselton, I did a 9:06, I think. Um, so with for the full Ironman. Um, and then following that this year, I think is when I like really stepped up in terms of like pushing myself in on actual race day. And so at Geelong, I did a around a 3:58, 3:59, um, for the half Ironman. So the first time to go sub four, which I was really happy with, like with no exceptions to sort of the distances as well. So I was pretty pleased with that performance.
Yeah, honest course at Melbourne, at Geelong.
At
Sorry,
Geelong, yeah,
that's a good
yeah,
course to do sub four on.
yeah. It was a good
Yep.
day, by my standards, and I was very, very happy with that performance. And then sort of had, I guess, more of a prolonged break, moving towards sunny coast. And then just recently, I think I did 4:05 there, on the day, which didn't. I mean, there's a few things that went on within the race, and I don't think I probably nailed the nutrition on that day, or just didn't rock up feeling quite how I wanted to. So I mean, 4:05 is still a fantastic time compared to what I started out with, and I was very happy with that. But by the own standards that I wanted to sort of meet, my own standards, I was a little bit disappointed with that effort. So I sort of saw this Melbourne race as a redemption, and have to really lay it all out on the line and sort of push myself so I can try and see what I actually can do. Um, yeah, so I was really looking forward to the Melbourne race, and that was definitely the A race for the year that I was targeting, that I sort of set out with from the start. Yeah. So it was a little bit disappointing when they rocked up and they shortened the swim and sort of put a bit of an asterisk over it. I think 3:50, calculated time, maybe a little bit generous, but I don't know, I'll take it if you give it to me, Jamie.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm just sort of guessing. I've obviously done a little bit of research, and I think you sort of swim around a 26. So, I think I think around adding 10 minutes, maybe closer to 15, but you're well and
Yeah.
truly sub four, and maybe in that 350 to 355 range. But obviously, none of us will ever really know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just always a bit of a shame when there's an asterisk when as age troopers, I think one thing we are doing is we're chasing times and seeing improvements in times, even
Mm.
though it isn't always, a fair match. The distances should always be the same. Obviously, you get different courses and different conditions and different racing dynamics with the rolling start, but I think definitely within that range. For the sake of this conversation and looking at that progression over the last year or two, would
Yeah.
be fair.
Yeah. No, no. I think yeah, it makes things very easy, and yeah, it's very kind. Thanks.
No worries. Okay, so tell us about the prep leading into Melbourne. So you've done Sunshine Coast. Not everything went, according to plan there. Um, and there's about 8 to 10 weeks between Sunshine Coast and Melbourne. So do you get back from Sunshine Coast and go straight into a block specific to Melbourne 70.3? So how long is your prep, and what are we looking at? I'm assuming there's no sort of typical week because of the shift work. So are there certain targets you're trying to hit week to week? Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so I was actually up in Mildura for the last, like, I guess, a few weeks of the training, just because I was like, again, it's another satellite division of Monash Health, and so I was up there doing a surgical rotation, which had more regular hours, thankfully. So I was able to structure my training a little bit more regularly. So yeah, as you said, got back from Sunny Coast and pretty much got straight back into it after a little bit of a rest, maybe a few days off. After that, and I think I got straight back into maybe a little bit of higher volume. So did a longer ride the first weekend back with some like 30 to 45-minute efforts throughout the ride. Just to sort of like a bit below race pace power. And then there was a run off the bike, and that was sort of the general sort of trend for the next 4 weeks of um, longer rides with smaller segments of uh, close to, if not a little bit under, race pace power, just to sort of simulate that with then some running efforts as well. So yeah, it was about a 10 week, I think, gap between the two, as you said, and so it's just generally sort of progressing the volume of the training without doing it too much, whilst having a few little test sessions sprinkled throughout just to see how things are going and get the legs conditioned for a fairly good effort on race day.
Okay, so when you said more regular hours, was it more like a Monday to Friday scenario?
Yeah, exactly.
It was?
Bar maybe 2 weeks, where I was covering the ward. So that's like when you have to work some irregular hours. It was a fairly 9 to 5. Oh, sorry, it was actually 6 till 3 sort of week. So it's pretty good for, I guess, afternoon training. Um, you can go and get a few different sessions in from 3 o'clock. So it was pretty handy having that. And then up in Mildura as well, it can get pretty hot up there. It's in like the northwest corner of the state. Um, and I think it was 35 degrees, 40 degrees some days, and just pancake flat roads. So could really dial in on the TT bike and sort of adapt myself to that condition, which historically I'm not very good at higher heat conditions. So I was pretty happy with that. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, because we do have those regular hours, and therefore the training structure was a bit more um, regular as well. Do you mind maybe taking us through like a Monday to Sunday? Like obviously mentioned, I think
Yeah.
the Saturday or Sunday is your longer ride into a brick run. But just yeah, take us through Monday to Monday to Sunday.
Yeah. So Monday was predominantly just a swim day for me. So I might get in the pool and do maybe like three to 3.5 Ks of swimming, about an hour of work, with some like 100 meter efforts, or like VO2 efforts on the Monday. So it's predominantly like a swim slash recovery day from the weekend.
Yep.
And then on
And hundreds of
Tuesday,
VO2 for you. What sort of pace are we talking? What are you trying to hold and what are you leaving on?
so the sets like would differ, but predominantly if I was trying to do like hundreds with maybe 30 seconds rest, I'd be trying to hit the 118s,
Yep.
around that pace, 115 to 120 maybe for there. And then if I was leaving with like just 10 seconds rest, maybe close to 120 to 125s, for those. And then I might do like 10 100s leaving on 10 seconds. So what's that? Maybe on the 130 or the
Yep.
135.
Yeah. So
Um,
depending on what the type of session. So if it's a VO2 type
yeah,
session, you get more rest, and so obviously you go a bit faster. If it's more of a dialing in a tempo or race intensity, shorter rest,
yeah,
and
yeah,
therefore a little
exactly.
bit slower.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yep, cool. All right, on to
Yeah.
Tuesday.
Yeah. So Tuesday was uh, a ride day, like with a run off the bike. So I think it would generally be I'm just trying to think back, like more like I think another VO2 session on the bike with um some like mid to longer efforts. So you might do like I think it was like 5x5s. I think were a few times we did those, like with a warm up and a cool down on either side, which you could extend out if you had more time. So that was good to get sort of, I guess, more volume in as well, because then I could had the whole afternoon to sort of do a longer ride. So I could do a 2 hour ride on a weekday, which is pretty handy. With a good chunk of structured, work in the middle of that on either side. And then after every ride, it's pretty much a given that I think you're always doing a run, which were generally 30 minutes. So I'd always just do a 30-minute run pretty much off the bike. Um, and so that was predominantly a Tuesday.
Yeah, so
Um,
you've got this structured session, and the key part of that session is 5x5. So if you're at home or you're a bit more time poor, that might have just been on the trainer or something. But because you had the freedom and you had most of the afternoon to train, you had the freedom and flexibility to make that a bit of a longer
yeah,
ride, and then yeah, just a easy 30 minutes off the bike.
yeah, exactly right. And I had the benefit of being up in Mildura, which was nice and warm, dry conditions, not like Melbourne where it's just miserable and drizzling all the time. But yeah, I will say, riding on the trainer, it's like a ratio of 1 to 2 for time. it's so intense on the trainer, so it's definitely not something to sniff at. I find all the sessions on the trainer are so much harder than outdoors. So yeah, it's certainly not a bad thing getting on the trainer.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hear that a lot from a lot of athletes that they tend to find it's easier to hold certain powers or hit certain powers out on the road compared to on the trainer, which yeah, sounds like you're sort of in that boat.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So
Um,
that's Monday, Tuesday, on to Wednesday.
Wednesday was predominantly like a run day. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, a sort of your midweek were the midweek sort of hard sessions that we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so Wednesday would be a run day. So it would vary between again um, doing maybe some progressive 1K efforts. So you might do 6 by 1K or 8 by 1K, and just moving up the pace at a like um, pretty pretty high or like above race pace for the 70.3. Um, so I found those sessions quite challenging just because I'm a bigger person. I find running fast, I guess, maybe a bit harder. So I found those really, really good sessions to try and really up my pace, and get used to like I guess running at that higher level when stepping back down to a longer progressive run. So yeah, that was a Wednesday session, and then in addition to the run, might just do an easy swim, a shorter swim, so maybe 30 minutes in the pool of a few short efforts, maybe 100, 200, and then a few 50-meter efforts with drills sort of on either side of that just to pad out a little bit of recovery. Yeah, so an easy swim and a hard run on Wednesday.
Yep. That's your key run day for the week.
Yeah, yeah, exactly right. And I think, I mean, as I said, I'm like pretty tall. I'm 196, 197 centimeters, like 95 kilos. So I think I'm pretty worried running that I'm going to injure myself, especially when I think it's so prevalent in the sport. Just injuries and trying to stay injury free is probably the main thing I think on my mind most of the time. And running being such a high impact sort of sport, I think you want to like really maximize your sessions, but not overdo it in the running. Um, where it was good to do those sort of shorter 1K efforts without overdoing it. So yeah, that was the really hard run day.
Yeah, sweet. And Thursday.
Thursday was another hard ride, so sort of similar to the Tuesday ride, maybe with like a bit of a longer emphasis on the efforts. So sort of same sort of thing, warm up, cool down with longer efforts throughout the session at maybe race pace power. So maybe like do 3 by 8 minute efforts or something like that, or 2 by 10, just something um, to get the legs feeling like I know and used to the power that you might be putting out. And then, as I said, run off the bike. That's a given. So yeah, that was the Thursday session.
Yeah, so lower intensity than the Tuesday ride, but more dialing in your race intensity. But yeah, one theme so far, everything's quite simple, which is a good thing. But just an observation is you're pretty simple. Hundreds in the pool, some VO2 work, 5 by 5, 30-minute runs off the bike, some 1K reps, and then yeah, up to 3 by 8 or 2 by 10. So far, very very simple, very repeatable.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean,
obviously that works.
yeah, exactly right. I think, I mean, I think Jared and the Trivello team, they're very dialed in with their program. They've got, a very good, results sheet on. They can look at their training and see what works and what doesn't work for them. And so I think, they've really applied that fairly well to a lot of their athletes. And so it's certainly what's worked for me, and it definitely works well just to replicate it and keep on going. And yeah, it's been very, very helpful. And then so I guess looking at from Thursday on to Friday, the session that I'll do on Friday would be predominantly a swim session, which was more focused towards in like longer efforts in the pool. So it might be like 2 by 400 or 1 800, with followed by some 200s and then stepping down to 100s in the pool, usually around that 3 kilometer, 3.5 kilometer sort of total distance in the session um, for the day. And then just because it's preceding the weekend, that was predominantly the only session on the day. Sort of seems like a recovery day, if you can call it that, because he's still doing a session. But yeah, like active recovery,
Yeah, leg rest
getting
day.
getting ready for the weekend.
Yep. All right. So on to that weekend. So you mentioned earlier that long ride. Is that the Saturday or the Sunday typically?
I generally do it on the Saturday. I
Yep.
mean, yeah, just I have no idea why, but it's just Saturday is ride day and Sunday is long run day for some reason. I think
Hmm.
it's universal for most people, but
Yeah, it's quite a
depending on the
typical
weather,
structure.
yeah, depending on the weather, I guess. If I saw the week, if the weather was going to be better on Sunday, I might ride on the Sunday just because I'd rather run in slightly more treacherous conditions rather than riding just from a safety perspective.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so for the Saturday, so let's say it was a long ride on the Saturday. As I said, it would vary depending on the position of like the block and where I was at. So earlier on, as I said, it would be that sort of longer ride with long efforts sort of built into the ride. So it might be a 3 hour ride, 4 hour ride with some 45-minute efforts mixed in the middle. So you might do 3 by 45 at uh, race pace or below race pace, um, with a run off the bike. And then moving towards, I guess, trying to dial in towards the end, it was more so doing like a targeted sort of session. So you might do, um, I guess, like an hour or a 75-kilometer time trial at race pace with a time trial run off the bike, just to see how the legs can react to that sort of effort.
Yep. Cool. So 3 to 4 hour ride is typical, and then followed by your standard 30-minute easy run,
Well,
typically.
yes, yeah, typically, I think that was generally what it was. I'd have to look back exactly. Like, I think it was usually it was 30 minutes. That just
Yeah.
feels. I feel like it was 30 minutes, but it might have been different. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 30.
No, no, that's okay. And then you said your long run was on the Sunday. How long was the long run? And is it just easy? And then was there any other sessions on that day as well?
Yeah, so predominantly a long run, I guess, anywhere north of an hour and 15, hour and 30. As I said, I didn't want to injure myself running,
Hmm.
and just tried to incorporate as much hill climbing as possible in the run. Um, and maybe further towards the end, um, we started doing some more targeted sessions on the running on the Sunday, doing maybe like might do a practice half marathon at race pace, or maybe a little bit above race pace, given you're fresh on the day, just to see how you can do. Or yeah, I don't think there was any occasions where we did a long run with any efforts sort of built into the long run. I think if it was a easy long run, it would just be a purely easy long run on the Sunday just to get some volume into the legs. And if it was going to be intensity on the Sunday long run, then it was, as I said, going to be sort of a race simulation session.
Yeah, got it. And do you do any gym work or strength and conditioning as part of a standard week?
I used to do spend a lot of time in the gym, but I don't so much anymore. So like as I got more and more into, I guess, structured training, I found it just, I mean, yeah, a bit tricky to sort of incorporate it. Maybe I was just a bit lazy, but uh, I might just do one session a week. And then, to be fair, it's not even training anything that'll help triathlon. It's just training the disco muscles. So like, biceps, pecs, nothing too serious.
Okay, so it's not like strength and conditioning that is sort of
No, no,
functional or
yeah,
relevant for endurance sport. It's just more,
yeah,
um, make your arms look good in a singlet.
pretty much, yeah, just to keep,
Look good
it
when you
shows,
take
yeah,
your top off running in
yeah,
Ventura. Yeah, no worries. That's all right.
shows the
Okay, so we
vanity
got
like shining through.
all right. So you got yeah, three. Looks like a standard week is three swims, three bikes. Interestingly, you mentioned your running and not wanting to get injured, but you actually do five runs if you include the three little brick
Yeah,
sessions, easy, and then your long run, and then your specific run with the typically the 1K rep. So your frequency's up there. Obviously, the intensity is low in 4 out of 5 of those, unless you're doing a specific sort of race simulation or testing session. Do you happen to know your totals across swim, bike, and run in terms of distances covered, and then what an average week of training is in hours?
Oh, um, off the
Just
top
to
of
wrap a
my
bow
head,
in sort of your typical week.
yeah, I mean, on the bike, it's always tricky. I think I might have been doing like time wise, maybe 5 to 6 hours on the bike. I think
Hmm.
I don't you're not going to be able to quote me on these numbers because I don't have the like Training Peaks or Strava up. So, but I think it was generally around that, generally averaging around 200 k's on the bike. Not
Yeah.
that's a bit of an arbitrary number because you could be doing hills or you could be on the trainer, so you never know.
Yeah.
Um, and then maybe running. I think generally around like that 40 to 50 kilometer sort of range, getting that in on the week. Um, and then swimming maybe 8 Ks maybe throughout the week, 8 to 9 Ks. So, I mean, a lot of training, I guess, like um, from, I guess, from a layperson standards, but compared to what I guess the professional guys are doing and some amateur age groupers are doing, it's nothing crazy, but yeah, probably in total, maybe like 10 to 15 hours of training, I think, in the week.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. There's not a lot of volume or really high frequency of any one discipline, but the main thing here is you were consistent. It was simple, and it's obviously working. Like your training age is quite low, and yeah, it's yielding pretty positive results. So that's good. So a couple of quick ones off the back of that before we get into the race itself. They mentioned a couple of times doing the race simulations. Can you just take us through one of those sessions? Like how long before the race is it? Yeah, and what are one of those key bricks? Where it's your long ride into a bit more of a race specific run. What do they look like?
Yeah, so I guess thinking back, one of the main sessions we did was it was a 60-minute TT with I think a 10K run off the bike. So the 60-minute at I guess the FTP sort of power that I had, just to see, or maybe a little bit under, like so like 85 to 95% of FTP for that 60-minute effort.
Yeah.
And then it was a 10K run off the bike at, I guess, race pace or a bit above race pace, just to see how things go. And then practicing nutrition throughout just to make sure what I was doing was working um, for the session. So yeah, that was a key sort of race sim session.
And when was that out? 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out?
Maybe even 2 to 3 weeks out. The last 2 to 3 weeks were one of those sessions. Yeah, I
Yeah. And
think.
then do you do any other testing or time trials
Mm,
throughout a typical race block?
yeah, well, I think generally every 3 weeks, 3 to 6 weeks, you do a test to see how you're progressing, which would be like a one one to 1,500 meter, so 1K, sorry, to 1.5K time trial swim, just to see how you're going in the pool, and then an FTP test on the bike, and then uh, either a half marathon, 10K, or a 5K to see how things are going on the run. Predominantly a 10K, I think, time trial was the go-to sort of testing session to see how things are going.
Yeah, okay. And then those numbers sort of feature in the block or in the race plan, I assume.
Yeah, exactly right. I
Yep.
mean, as you test, you don't go off your all-time best. You go off how you went on that week, that
Yeah.
test week, and then you go from there. Unless it was like you had a particularly bad day, I guess, on the testing day, and you know you can do better. But yeah, that's predominantly, I think, the framework.
Yep. And then speaking of the FTP, you've already said you're a big guy. What is your FTP? Because I know people like this.
My most recent one, I held for the 20 minutes. I held around 438 watts. So I think it makes it like 416 is my
Yep.
FTP. Um, which yeah, I was pretty happy with how that went. That was on a windy course, though. I will say out at Casey Fields, which so it was hard to keep the power on around the corners. I reckon I could have pushed 440, if I had a straight course. Just to know, I like round numbers, so
Fair enough. We
yeah,
all have a little bit of OCD. So 416, and you said you were 98 kilos?
yeah, probably around that, around 95 to 98 kilos. Yeah,
Yeah, so FTP, that puts your FTP on that day at like 4.2 watts a kilo.
yeah, yeah.
And then
So
what do
nothing.
you, yeah, go on.
Also, I was going to say nothing crazy because being a bigger guy, it certainly makes it harder to get the watts per kilo up. But yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate number.
And then what did you hold on race day? What sort of power did you hold? What's your race day wattage?
Um, I think so I think the average might have been around 350 watts for the full 90 Ks, or maybe up to 355. I should be able to quickly check for you actually, and not just make numbers up.
That's around.
348 was yeah, 348
Yeah.
was the average power, and then so
Yeah.
I think the first lap I held 360 watts,
Yeah.
because that was the sort of limit I was trying to hold, and then on the second lap I dropped down a bit, and obviously averaged probably 340 for that second lap.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in
Yeah.
sort of around that 3.6 watts a kilo. So that you must be quite aerodynamic and quite efficient too. Have you done a lot of work on your bike fit, or you just naturally sit on the bike quite well?
I've done it, I'd say predominantly just looking at the mirror, that I've got to try and get things lined up. I haven't had done anything formal. But yeah, I think it's always difficult to say with the aero testing whether or not a change you've made is a good change. If you don't have an actual formal system to test it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think I mean, yeah, I think I try as hard as I can whilst I'm riding to just keep my head down and not crash.
Yeah. So again, just real simple things. So you must be a natural. Um,
Well, I think I take a lot of time just to look at what other people's doing, what a professional's doing. I mean, it's free speed really if you can just change your position. And I guess the smaller you can make yourself, the faster you will go. Um, in a very very simple way of looking at it. I chuck the bottle down the top because that's what all the other people are doing. Whether or not it makes a difference, don't know.
yeah, that one's a
But
pretty
yeah,
well tested. I think that's a pretty much a good one. Were you in the calf sleeves yet?
I have got the calf sleeves. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not sure about the look the first time I saw it, but it's grown on me. And yeah, whether or not, again, I haven't looked into the formal numbers of what they're providing me, but anything I can get, I will take, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. All right. And are you doing all your riding on a time trial bike? Or are you ever getting on the roadie?
As we get closer to the race, if I'm doing a specific block, I'll try to just stay on the time trial bike. But I do have a road bike that I will use as well. So now I think I'll jump back onto the road bike, and I'm getting into doing some of the crit races that are going on around Melbourne at the moment. So I'll be predominantly on the road bike now. But yeah, I think if I'm doing a triathlon specific sort of session, I should probably do it on the tri bike. Just simulate that position, and then because you're using different muscles on the different bike as well. So yeah.
Yep. Okay. So you've had a good block. You're leading into the race. So tell us about your goals for this race. Were they time based like we discussed
Yeah,
before, or was it about sort of racing and winning your age group? Where did you know you'd be near the? I'm assuming you'd know you'd be near the pointy end of the age group field. So yeah, what was the plan for the race, and what were the goals for the race?
yeah. Well, as I said, first of all, I wanted the redemption race from what I thought I could have done at Sunny Coast. So that was the main thing, sort of motivating me, and then just wanted the platform to sort of push myself and really dig deep and see what I could do with all the hard training that I'd sort of pieced together. So moving into the race, I didn't have any sort of. I guess I'd always wanted from Geelong. I thought the next goal, but I want to try and hit that sub 350 minute goal. So that was, I guess, a loose goal that I had in the back of my mind. But I thought on the day, don't try to worry too much about the time or your actual, I guess, finishing position. Just go out there, stick to the numbers that you've done on training. Sort of fall back on your training, and do what you can do, and let the finishing time take care of itself. Really.
Yep. Got it. All right. So just walk us through swim, bike, run quickly then. So we have a recap of the day. We know the finish time was
Yeah.
3:39 with an asterisk, which I'm sort of calling a 3:50, ish. So yeah, just walk through how you went in the swim, how you handled those conditions. You mentioned the bike, but just give us your splits, and then also how the run went.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess yeah, obviously everybody has the same experience on the day, same conditions. So got down to the transition nice and early just to get everything set up. As you said, everyone's a bit OCD in triathlon, and I think I'm particularly like a type A sort of personality, so everything's got to be lined up perfect. And then I was looking forward to the swim. I would say like I'm probably more of a middle to like upper pack sort of swimmer, so I definitely benefit, I guess, from that a little bit from the swim, especially when you got a wetsuit and you're drafting other people as well. So that helps. And so I was a bit disappointed when they shortened the swim, I guess, for that reason. Um, but those choppy conditions, they were certainly pretty hectic, and it was tough to get out to that first buoy. Um, but I've swum a fair bit in the bay and know what those conditions can be like. So I've certainly practiced out there in the open water, which I think is a must. I think if you're going to try and have a good go, because you can never know what the conditions are going to be like. So yeah, my main pace was probably a 120 to a 124 for the swim, which I think I ended up doing probably something around that, maybe a bit slower on the day for the 900 meters or 1K, whatever it was. So yeah, but look, just as it played it safe in the swim, sort of started maybe in the middle of the first wave towards maybe the back. It's so hard to get a good position in that T that the starting swim. I was standing with my friend, and then we were honestly five back from the start, and then they said, "Oh yeah, all the age groupers come forward," and then immediately I was about 50 people back. I don't know how it happened, but anyway, yeah. So that
Yeah, the rolling starts are tricky like that. If you want to try and
very
get a warm up and do that, but you also want to line up and be near the front, it can, yeah, it's tricky to manage. Sometimes I've managed
yeah
to be right at the front, and other times I've got caught and been, yeah, way back and just not where I want to be. I guess the
yeah
positive is, your rate, if you're delayed for any reason, your race only starts when you cross the line. But if you like to sort of be near the pointy end, or you're going to be near the pointy end, it can be a bit tricky. And then for the guys racing for positions, it's yeah, you can be tactical with where you start as well. So it's an interesting one. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Yeah, for
no, I
now,
don't think
it's
so.
obviously not up to us, but yeah, it is
Yeah.
definitely an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's a tricky one as well with the swim. I never know where to start because, as I said, I don't think I'd ever lead the swim, but I'd benefit from being on someone's feet who are faster, obviously.
Mm.
And you don't want to have to be slowing down to swim over the top of people. And obviously, you don't want to be doing that anyway. But then there's always a lot of people up the front of the swim who are very good, but then also maybe who like get past. So it's a bit tricky trying to, find the right medium between that.
Yeah,
Um,
agreed.
but it's helpful to have that draft, that's for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Being surrounded by some faster athletes, whether it's cross swim, bike, and run, can definitely help elevate performance. But it's just tricky to gauge what that is because it's such a
Yeah,
big range of athletes, even within the four individual categories. So
yeah, exactly right.
anyway, that was a swim. You plowed through the chop in the
Yeah,
bay, and yeah, heading out onto the bike. So tell us how you found the
yeah,
bike.
yeah. So, I mean, for me, perfect conditions really like a little bit of a wind, but not really that noticeable. It actually felt like a tailwind in both directions, funnily enough. I don't know how that's possible, but
You
probably the
must
only
have good
day,
legs. That never happens.
the only day of the year I think in Melbourne where it's like not howling in one direction. So that was pretty good. But yeah, not too hot, overcast. That was fairly good. You're not going to sweat too much. You don't have to have too much hydration. So managed to jump on the bike and just locked into my power as sort of quickly as I could. Did a few activation sort of efforts going down towards that first turnaround point. Um, and then as it turned the corner, just got in position, did the shoes up, and dialed in for the 90-minute on the 90-kilometer ride. Sorry, and just tried to hit the power that I'd set and sort of knew that I could do through training.
Yeah, and I think you said before, was that 360 for lap one and 340 for lap two?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. I think I lost one of my bottles out the back, bounced out the nutrition bottle, which is a bit of a shame. So stopped a bit and picked up some gels from one of the aid stations on the second lap. But not that I think that probably is a contributor towards the power, but yeah, that was certainly maybe affected it a little bit. and they just try to keep safe on the ride. I think it can get pretty congested, and I mean there are a few unfortunate circumstances where I saw some people hit the deck, um, which was you know pretty sad to see. I hope they were okay. But yeah, it's just you always have to be careful when you're out riding the bike, and just always be mindful and concentrating out there.
And were you solo for most of the ride? Were you with a bit of a group? Was
Oh
there two or three of you riding?
no,
Or
I was by myself all day.
yeah, yeah, nice,
Yeah, I don't
cool.
think I've ever been. I don't think I've ever been on a bike ride where I missed someone
Yeah,
in
there
one
you
of the
go.
events.
You
Like
must be riding
yeah,
too fast. So, what was your bike split?
two oh 204. I think it would be like around 204 flat. I think it would have been.
Yeah, solid.
Um,
That's pretty quick. No wonder you're riding by yourself.
yeah. Oh,
Cool. All
sorry, I'll
right.
get the
So,
time. 204:38 was the time. Yeah,
yeah, nice. Okay.
yeah.
So, swim went pretty well, non-eventful. Bike pretty solid. Locked into your power. 2 or 4 split. So, how'd you feel coming off the bike, and how did the run go? What was the plan of attack on the run?
Yeah, felt good coming off the bike because had sort of eased up, I guess, a little bit in the last five Ks, just to sort of give and shake out the legs a little bit, and just have them feeling fresh. Took on a caffeine gel in the last, I guess it was 5 Ks, just to get ready to hit the run. So yeah, I was feeling good. Um, and then I think I need to improve my transitions a little bit. But yeah, coming into the run felt pretty good, and obviously don't want to go out too hard, which I think can be the trick for young players. Like you've just finished the ride, and you're super excited to get into the run, feel $1 million, and you just go out too hard on the run, which I'm certainly a culprit of doing. Um, so yeah, I was lucky enough. I think there were two of the other two professional guys were sort of having an easy sort of run day, which was nice. They're still running very quickly, mind you. So they sort of paced the first 5Ks for me. I was just sitting behind them. And then as I got to the turnaround, decided to bring up the pace as we got there. And then sort of just dug in and tried to hold the pace that I was trying to run through for the day, which was around a 3:45 split for the run. And then sort of wind it up as I got to the end. So I think looking at the paces that I did, I think I first 3Ks were maybe a 3:55, 3:50 sort of pace for the first 3Ks. And then I sort of wound it up to finish around the 3:40 pace, and averaged like a 3:41, I think, pace for the whole run. Um, yeah, something like that.
They're pretty quick. So 341 is what's that, like a 118 time
Uh,
split?
yeah, it was 118, I think, on the day. And so the actual formal time was 1:17:27 for the run. So
Yeah.
whether or not it was a bit short or not, but yeah, that was around the pace.
Yeah. So other than a little bit of pacing for a couple of those pro boys, you were solo for the run as well.
Yeah,
Yep.
again, by my lonesome. But I mean, obviously with Melbourne, you can have like you got the two turnarounds, two turnaround points, sorry. And so you can see who's chasing you. Um, and so I saw the two other guys who I'm friends with, who were coming like flat chat for me. So I realized, oh, I've probably got to start moving, otherwise they're going to catch me. So that was super motivating, to
Yep.
see them giving their all too. So yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. So you felt good. Did you know you were leading the age group race?
Um, had a few call outs as well from the coach as well, so that definitely helped. And did know that I thought I was just leading the I guess my age group, the 18 to 24 age group. But I
Yep.
wasn't really thinking about, I guess, the winning actually, like throughout the race. Like I just wanted to try and do the best time that I could do. I wasn't really thinking about the overall position or anything like that. And then as you cross the line, you think, oh, it's pretty nice to be, I guess, the first age grouper over the line, I think. So that was pretty good. And I realized as well, because I couldn't see anyone else out on the course as well. So I think back in the back of my mind, I knew what was going on. But yeah.
Oh, cool. Well done. Thanks for sharing. So yeah, very, very, very solid day out. Won the age group, won the overall age group race. I think we can say you ticked off your target of your 350 goal. What's the next race you're going to do?
Oh, thank you very much, Jamie. That's very nice of you to say. As for the next goal, I well, as I said, I've got the world champs next year, the 70.3 world champs, and the only other race I've signed up for so far is Ironman Cairns, which I'm actually sort of reconsidering at the moment because I don't know if that'd be the best thing to do if you're trying to look at targeting 70.3 at the end of the year. I'm not sure. So I might have to like, over the break now, I might have to reconsider things. Might look to go back to Geelong on that course and try and compare apples to apples and see what I can do on that course again. But yeah, I think I need to sit down, have a good think about what I want to do.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, watch this space then. So, a couple other things before we finish up. Have you got a favorite session that you do, or maybe a session that you think we should try?
Uh I think I think the best session that I think I always look forward to is a long ride, just because it's so enjoyable to go out there and see a different area around where you live. I think for the 70.3, maybe that 3 hour long ride with like the longer efforts built into it
Hmm.
at like maybe 70 to 80% of your FTP or something like that, um, is probably maybe one of the better things you can do. Um, and then maybe running off the bike as well, just so you're getting that condition in the legs. And it doesn't have to be anything intense on the run either. I think it's just getting your legs used to doing it.
Yeah, again, I think that's a yeah common theme through this conversation is the simplicity of it. So, yeah, your sort of your favorite and what you think people should do if they want to do a good 70.3 is just your long ride with some intervals in there, probably just below your race intensity, and then running off those long rides, even if it is only for half an hour and nice and easy. So that's pretty good. Do you have
Yeah.
a least favorite session? You said you like basically can't wait to train. So do you have a type of session or a theme of session on one that
Mm.
you don't really enjoy or would be at the bottom of the list or not really?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I do have one, and it's the recovery session on Zwift when you're sort of just sitting there for 50 minutes, 55 minutes, pushing very little power,
Yeah.
and your ass begins to go numb because that's where all the weight is, and it's just the most unpleasant thing I've ever done. Like, yeah, you can't stand it. That's
That's
the
a
one session I
classic
have.
stereotypical type A high performer triathlete answer. Just I hate my recovery session. So yeah, noted. It's yeah, not unsurprising now that you've explained it. So that's good. Have you got any other tips for age groupers or age groupers who are managing shift work perhaps that is just sort of absolutely a must that you've found to maintain high performance, but also, work and your lifestyle and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still fairly junior in, I guess, everything that I'm doing. So I'm not an expert by any means, but I think just what's worked for me is like having consistency in your sessions. And even if, you're feeling a bit, tired and fatigued on the day, like to an extent, I guess you got to put an asterisk on that as well. Like if you're really buggered, maybe you should just have a full rest day. But if you're just feeling a little bit fatigued, just knowing that you've got a range of, I guess, effort that you can work on in your session. And so I guess not just beating the entire session if you're feeling fatigued and just knowing that, okay, today's session is going to be a little bit below what I guess my standard is, and knowing that, you know, maybe dropping back the intensity, but just not giving up on the session. Um, yeah, I think that's something. I remember someone said that to me when I was rowing. They said like, because you're in a 2K, or if you're doing a race or anything like that, it's just you never ever give up. You just sort of, if you need to, you can row a slower, like a lower intensity than what you're doing, but just never ever give up. And I've sort of just like that's always in the back of my mind. It's just like don't ever stop because you'll hate yourself if you do. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I think that's a good tip. So consistency, obviously, that comes up a lot. But one practical piece of advice into actually being able to put that into practice is, not just canning the sessions that where you don't feel great. We're always going to have days, and especially you guys as shift workers are going to have those days where you're tired or fatigued or you're underslept. And start the session, do the warm up, see how you feel, and if the main set's just not going to happen as intended, you can still try and do something useful. So I think that's a good tip for everybody, but especially for age groupers and especially age groupers who work shifts and maybe don't have that perfect pattern of sleep and rest and recovery days, and you just sort of got to go with the flow a little bit.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And I think it's tricky. I mean, I'm an individual that doesn't. I mean, uh, I don't like going out and partying and spending too much time in the nightlife. So I guess predominantly my life is work and then training and then intermittently catching up with friends and stuff. So it's tricky if you're balancing, as well. I don't have the added pressure of children and, a mortgage or anything like that. So I've certainly got it easy in comparison to, I think, a lot of the other age groupers that are doing it. So yeah, there's a lot of caveats, I think, on, the what I'm doing compared to everybody else. So
Yeah, good, definitely a good point. If you're not going out partying, those disco muscle gym sessions are just
I,
wasted.
they're useless. I know. It's just the intermittent session. It's you walk from the pool, you got to get undressed, and then in the 5 meters that you jump into the pool, you got to be confident. Confidence is key.
That's good. No, that's a good way to end. So anyway, mate, thank you, Roland, for coming on and sharing a little bit about your journey. Albeit the fact that it's short, it doesn't make it any less interesting. And I definitely think there'll be a lot of people watching this space. So yeah, let us know what you end up doing next. And yeah, we might see you at a race course again soon, terrorizing the age
Yeah.
group field.
Oh, thank you very much, Jamie. Thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, really enjoyed chatting with you.
No worries. Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Diary of an Age Grouper podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for future guests, please contact us via the Diary of an Age Grouper Instagram page. Alternatively, you can email info@jetcoaching.com.au. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. This podcast was born to discuss all things age group triathlon. As an athlete, coach, and fan of the sport, I've always been intrigued with different approaches to training and how to optimize an individual's performance. We will speak to athletes who perform at a high level, as well as those with an interesting story. We will speak to coaches with a vast array of experience, and also experts in various fields. We want to sift through what the physiology labs tell us, as well as what we see the pros doing, and take the lessons that apply to us. This is the Diary of an Age Grouper.